I'm Hannah. I'm the Conservation and Research Liaison at the Trust, so I'm in the Conservation and Research team. Much of my position involves a lot of communications, so working on the social media along with our marketing team, and lots of the communications to do with our CNR work. So today is our Science Saturday post, and I thought I would give you a little bit of an overview of releasing and monitoring birds after they've been rehabilitated in our National Bird of Prey hospital. Our hospital gets around 200 birds per year admitted per year, and we have a really great success rate with this. More than 60% of those birds are successfully rehabilitated and released back into the wild, which is really brilliant turnaround. So something we did last year in 2019 was looking at buzzards. The purpose of what we call post-release monitoring is to see what the survival of these birds is after rehabilitation, so how well they do after being rehabilitated, and also where they move, so if their movements change, how they might disperse after being rehabilitated. And essentially we're looking at how successful our rehabilitation and release methods are. So last year we were collecting data on buzzards, as I said. We were using what's called radio telemetry, and this is a method whereby you fit a radio transmitter to the tail of the buzzard. It doesn't cause the animal any harm, it's very light in weight, it's very carefully put into the tail feathers. You have to have training to be able to do this. Our conservation biologist, Dr. Matt Stevens, does it. It fits into the tail feather, and it's designed in a way that after a few weeks it just drops off naturally when that tail feather is molted. So the transmitter is fit to the tail feather. The animal is then released, and you use a radio tracker, which is called telemetry, which is essentially an aerial with a box that gives you a signal to find that bird. So you then go back each day and you work in the way from the last location, and you find it, and then you can get an idea of where that bird's moving and how well it's doing after it's been rehabilitated. So this is really important information for us, basically, to see how well our birds are doing after we've rehabbed them in the hospital. Another study we did quite some years ago in 2010, we did a similar sort of study with tawny owls. So as you all know, we get lots of juvenile tawny owls through our hospital each year. Because these are picked up when they're very little, they can't be released immediately, so they need to grow up in our hospital and then be released when they're ready to fledge. So we, over the course of 3 years, we did a study on tawny owls, where we looked at the different ways that you can release tawny owls back into the wild, and to see if there was a best way to do this, basically. So there are two different methods, or two main methods you might use for releasing birds back into the wild, and these are hard release and soft release. Now, hard release, which is the method we use at the hospital, and this research we conducted in 2010 is mainly the reason we use that method, along with other research and evidence for that being the best method. So hard release sounds awful, but actually just simply means taking the bird back to the area that it was found and then releasing it back into the wild. Soft release, in contrast, is sort of giving the birds a little bit of an extra helping hand. So they would have a release pen where they're allowed to accustom to the environment. They may be provisioned with extra food in the first few days of release, and then they can move on from that aviary when they're ready to go. Now, obviously we want to ensure the best welfare for our birds when we're releasing them, and we want to make sure that they have the best chance of survival after rehabilitation. But we do also have to think about cost. So we wanted to compare these two methods of release to see if it was actually worth doing the soft release method, giving the birds the extra helping hand. And hard release obviously works out a lot cheaper for us. It means that we can save more money and use that for treating the birds more effectively, rather than spending it on something which may not be needed, like the soft release method, which may not be necessary. So what we did actually find, and we compared 57 of our birds which we released over the course of 3 years. We compared this with other literature that had used the soft release method, and what we found was that the survival of those tawny owls was actually very similar between the two methods. And what's more, it was actually very similar to survival of wild birds as well. So this was great news for us, because this really means that we can carry on with the we have scientific evidence showing that we can carry on with those ways that we are releasing them using the hard release method. Now, there is some evidence that tawny owls won't even actually use the soft release method when they're offered it. So it's actually been found that they will just go off on their own straight away anyway, and won't tend to come back for that extra provision food and the safety of staying in that aviary. So it's great to conclude that we found that the hard release method was a high welfare, great way of releasing tawny owls back into the wild, and that's what we continue to do today. We found that the survival likelihood of those that were hard release versus those that were soft release was very, very similar. And what's more, it was also extremely similar to completely wild birds, where records of wild bird survival of tawny owl chicks was very similar to that of those that have been rehabilitated. So that's really great news for a hospital, and it really shows what a brilliant job all the hospital staff are doing. So I hope that gives a little bit of an overview of post-release monitoring and what we do in our hospital, and the way that we monitor birds after they've been released. As I said, we get up to 200 birds per year through our hospital, and it costs up to on average around £317 per bird to rehabilitate. So if you think about each bird, that's a lot of money. So if you do feel like supporting our hospital at this difficult time for us, we don't have our visitors coming through the door. We really are so grateful for any support that you can give us at this difficult time. And yeah, thank you very much for listening. I hope you have a great weekend.